This is a sports catastrophe production. Hey there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to another sports catastrophe on this day. And on this day, May the 24th, in the year 1980, the New York Islanders won the Stanley Cup. I know my New York Ranger friends are going to be pissed off saying, why are you paying attention to the New York freaking Islanders? Well, that's the problem. Well, that's why. So anyway, the 1980 Stanley Cup playoffs. We need some context. This was the first time that the playoffs have had 16 teams because the WHA was coming into the NHL, adding 4 teams: Edmonton, Hartford, Quebec, and Winnipeg. And meaning that the NHL will now have 21 teams, so you got to add some more playoff teams. So they did. So it went from 12 out of 17 chance to make the playoffs to a 16 out of 21. So based on points, they would be ranked. The division, the points within the division. You win the division, it doesn't matter. It's just based on your points. So it was pretty much good. However, divisional rankings were ignored, even though that, one division champ was 7th in the NHL with 3 non-division winners ahead of them. But anyway, yeah. So from 1 to 16, it happened. So anyway, so based on points, the parents would be reseeded based on best versus worst available team. The funny thing was, in the first round of the 1980 Stanley Cup playoffs, no team ranked 9th or worse actually ended up winning their playoff matchup. The top 8 teams were all won, with only Boston-Pittsburgh going to a 5th and deciding game, of course, best of 5, and only 3 other series having a 3-1 lead. This would be, of course, the playoffs, which the Atlanta Flames would suffer a 3-1 series loss to the New York Rangers. And worst of all for Atlanta, their hockey team would be moved to Calgary. Great move. So anyway, we're going to be talking about the Stanley Cup Finals in hindsight. So you had the number 1 overall team, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the number 3 overall team, New York Islanders, in the final. Number 1, Philly swept Edmonton 3-0. However, it took overtime. Two games had to go to overtime. So Edmonton, despite being screwed over, in a sense, actually forced Philly to overtime twice. The Islanders were number 5. Sorry, the Islanders were number 5 for some reason. Why do I say 5? Said number 3. The Islanders took on the LA Kings 5 versus 12. LA won game 2 at the Coliseum. No, it's not Coliseum, to make it 1-1. But the Islanders won both games on Forum Ice, Los Angeles Forum Ice, with an overtime goal by Ken Morrow being the hero. In the quarters, the Flyers would take on the Rangers. Of course, that would mean best of 7, not best of 5. And a hiccup in game 4 was the only thing preventing the Flyers from a sweep. So the Flyers looked good. While the New York Islanders were number 5, were supposed to lay down against the Boston Bruins, the veteran Boston Bruins, who got rid of Don Cherry. Unfortunately for Boston, they got. Despite Boston winning in overtime in game 4, on Islander home ice, the Islanders won their first 2 games at the Boston Garden to get the momentum and win 5 series. In the semifinals, the Flyers would take on the North Stars, and Minnesota won game 1 at the Spectrum. However, the Flyers would sweep the North Stars aside after that. Meanwhile, the New York Islanders would take on the Buffalo Sabres, who surprisingly had a better record. But the Islanders didn't care. They were up 3-0. They nearly blew it, but they won on home ice in game 6 to go to the Stanley Cup Finals. So, all was forgiven in a sense. So anyway, it would be the Islanders versus the Flyers. The Flyers were that team that had that 25-0-10 stretch, which they went 35 games without a loss. But of course, it's a little controversial because in 1980, they still didn't have regular season overtime, which meant that only playoff games were in overtime. Kind of stupid, don't you think? So anyway, the Islanders suffered 4 losses on their way to the Stanley Cup Finals. The Flyers only suffered 2. So anyway, in Game 1, the Islanders won in overtime on a goal by Dennis Potvin. Well, in the first period, Potvin scored twice in that game, with Mike Bossy and Stefan Persson getting the other ones. Flyers had Mel Bridgman, Bobby Clark, yes, he was still playing, and Rick McLeish scoring. Billy Smith beat Pete Peters. In Game 2, the Flyers crushed the Islanders in fine powder 8-3, chasing Billy Smith from the net and putting Chico Resch, yes, that Chico Resch, in. The goals were Paul Holmgren, Bob Kelly, Bobby Clark, Bill Barber, Holmgren again, Brian Propp, Tom Gorens, and Paul Holmgren. So Paul Holmgren shocked a lot of people into becoming, I believe, the first American to score a hat trick in overtime. A lot of people were shocked and all that. But yeah, it was just weird. Anyway, the Flyers won 8-3. Game 3 saw the Islanders crush the Flyers 6-2. The Flyers went with Phil Meyer in net instead of Pete Peters, which was shocking. I mean, why Phil Meyer and why take Pete Peters out? But anyway, Islanders scored Lauren Hanley, Dennis Potvin, Brian Trottier, Mike Bossy, Clark Gillies, Dennis Potvin, Bobby Clark, and Mike Busnix. Game 4, Islanders won 5-2. Peters was back in the net. Bossy, Gorey, Trottier, Nystrom, Gillies. Flyers were up against it. They had to win on home ice, and they did 6-3 as Peters beat Smith. Bobby Clark, Rick McLeish, Mike Busniak, Rick McLeish, Brian Propp, Paul Holmgren. But Game 6 was huge. It was in front of a national TV audience in the U.S. on CBS. CBS decided to make it part of its sports spectacular, which is amazing. I mean, CBS wanting to put the NHL on their thing for Saturday afternoon. So it was forced to be a Saturday afternoon game instead of a Saturday evening game, as most people would be. In fact, it is the last Stanley Cup Finals game to be played in the afternoon. This Game 6 and all that. CBC had Hockey Night in Canada do their stuff. Anyway, with the score 1-1 on goal, Reggie Leach for the Flyers and Danny Potvin for the Islanders, it was huge. However, Game 6 would be controversial for a missed call. Butch Goring picked up a pass from Clark Gillies and passed to Dwayne Sutter to make it 2-1 Islanders. The only problem was that was wrong. As it turned out on replay, Gillies passed Butch Goring the puck over the blue line, but backwards over the blue line, which meant that everyone was offside and all that. The Flyers argued to no avail, which was kind of stupid. And if instant replay had happened in 1980, that goal would have been waved off. Anyway, it was momentum. It was big momentum. 2-1. However, the Flyers did tie the game near the end of the first period on a goal by Brian Propp. But the Islanders made it 4-2 with goals by Mike Bossy and Bob Nystrom in the second period. Remember that name, Nystrom? But the Flyers didn't lay back. Bob Daly and John Paddock, both weirdly named defensemen, scored to make it 4-4. So the Flyers were forcing Game 6 overtime. And then at 7-11, funny that 7-11, the slushy goal, if you will. John Tonelli and Lauren Henning on the third line with Bobby Nystrom. Nystrom got a pass from Tonelli to score off over Pete Peters' blocker and giving the Islanders their first Stanley Cup of all time. And the Islanders went through a period of reflection. When they started out, they were crappy. They got Dennis Potvin first overall. They got Billy Smith in the expansion draft. The Islanders were just taking their time. And by 1975, they actually won a playoff series and almost got to the Stanley Cup Finals before losing to the Flyers in Game 7 in 75. But the Islanders kept getting better and better and better. They used the draft to their advantage, especially getting Mike Bossy after many teams passed them over. R.I.P. Mike Bossy. And of course, everyone remembers, well, I remember the goal. Tonelli to Nystrom. He scores. Bob Nystrom scores the goal. The Oilers win the Stanley Cup. Now, a lot of people probably think that call was the CBS call. Unfortunately, that was not the CBS call. The famous call was by CBC by one Jim Robson. Dan Kelly did the call, had a different call for CBS. He was the guy for CBS and all that. So the Oilers finally won their Stanley Cup that they should have had it. The only problem was that this game would be the last game on an American TV network, on a syndicate, on a U.S. network TV station, until the 1990 All-Star game in Pittsburgh. Can you imagine the 1980s having very little hockey on NBC, CBS, or even ABC? Basically, you had to have Olympic hockey coverage on ABC, but other than that, they just didn't care about hockey. Knows how far we've gotten with things. So here are the New York Islanders who got their name on the cup. At center, you got Lauren Henning, Wayne Merrick, Steve Tambellini, that's that guy, Brian Trottier, and Butch Goring. Wingers, Gary Horvat, Clark Gillies, Dwayne Sutter, Bob Bourne, Alex McKendry, Mike Bossy, Bob Nystrom, John Tonelli, and Anders Kalor. Defensemen were Sean Potvin, yes, Dennis's brother, with Dennis Potvin, Bob Lorimer, Ken Morrill, Stefan Persson, Gord Lane, and Dave Lageman. The goalies were Billy Smith and Chico Resch. Alex McKendry played 6 playoff games, but not in the finals. Sean Potvin didn't play in the playoffs, and their names and him and McKendry's name should not have been on the cup, but they were. Ken Morrill set a record. He was the first NHL player to win Olympic gold and the Stanley Cup in the same year. Usually that never happens because the Olympics were so full of amateurs and all that, and getting on an NHL team after that took a lot of time and effort. But, you know, Ken Morrill was part of the Miracle on Ice team, and then he won the Stanley Cup with the Islanders the same year. Al Arbor became the 4th person to win the Stanley Cup with 4 teams. He actually won a Stanley Cup as a player with the Red Wings in 1954, the Blackhawks of 61, and the Leafs of 62. So he won as a coach. Brian Trottier became the first Métis or indigenous person to win the Stanley Cup, first part of the Métis tribe. And Nystrom, Kalor, Pearson were the first Swedish-born and trained players to win the Stanley Cup, which was amazing and all that. So anyway, CBC's coverage of the Stanley Cup Finals was shared by Bob Cole, Dan Kelly, and Jim Robson. Cole would do play-by-play for the first half of games 1 and 2. Kelly would do the play-by-play for the rest of games 1 and 2, and then did games 3 through 4 by himself. Well, he did the second half, with Jim Robson doing the first half of 3 and 4, and game 6 entirely. The only reason why Robson did game 6 entirely was so that Dan Kelly was told by CBS they were going to do the game nationally. So anyway, the Hughes Television Network syndicated the first 5 games, and then game 6 was by CBS. Dan Kelly would do play-by-play for the first, third, and overtime periods, whereas Tim Ryan did the second period. I'm surprised they didn't just say Tim Ryan do the play-by-play and all that. And yeah, this was the last NHL game on U.S. network TV till 1990. Kind of pathetic. I mean, Americans complain about how the NHL doesn't treat them well. But I mean, the TV coverage was just bullshit. 10 years without a Stanley Cup, without an NHL game on your network, on network TV. Kind of pathetic, don't you think? Especially in the winter months. But I guess basketball took away everyone's attention. So it should. Anyway, I'm Joe Diamond. I do.